All right, and we're live. We're just going to wait a few minutes before we get started to let some people trickle in here. So everyone can wave and say hello and check you don't have anything in your teeth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cooking demonstration, so it could be worse.
We will have it after. We'll have something in our teeth afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, next time we have to find a way for everyone to have, things to be tasting at the same time.
Yeah, we'll have to spread it out or something.
Yeah, you got to send things from Arkansas over to Israel for us to taste.
Well, we could even do something sometime where it's like each of us has a different stage of a cooking dish. And so like one of us shows, this part of it, and one of us shows the next part of it.
Yeah, we can do it. All right, so we've got a few people joining us already, so let's start doing some intros. For anyone also who's joining us afterwards, hi, thanks for joining. So welcome to Cooking with Cannabis, a scientific take. This is our first cooking demonstration on Canigma and also our first live collaboration with Cannacook. So I'm Alana Goldberg, I'm the CEO of the Canigma. And we have with us here today Chelsea and Chris Miles from Cannacook, the CEO and COO respectively. We have two different angles of Chelsea and Chris at the moment, and you're going to see why in a second once we start our cooking demonstration. They're not just, weirdly using two camera angles. And we have Cody Peterson here with us as well, who's our scientific advisor from the Canigma and a clinical pharmacist. And he's going to be here to bring the scientific take from the name. So I'll give a bit of info about what we're going to be doing, and then I'm going to shut up and let Chris and Chelsea basically take the stage. Or really, we're going to let the cannabis and the cooking take the stage.
That's right.
So the idea today is to do a real basic take on cooking with cannabis. We're going to start off with cannabis oil and cannabis butter. Really the basic ingredients to any cooking with oil and with cannabis, And we're going to dig into why that is in a minute. I will point out also that, this is kind of the most accessible way to cook with cannabis is to use flour, but you don't need to necessarily. And it could be that you want to skip this step and you've already got oil and you want to go straight to making chocolate and gummies, which is going to be the second part of our demonstration. We're going to kind of talk about all different modifications you can make through the way, for example, vegan modifications. And yeah, it's going to be a fun demonstration. I'm glad you're all here to join us. Ask questions in the chat down on Facebook below all the way through. We're going to answer questions at the end, but if there's anything relevant or anything that you didn't understand or you want us to repeat as we're going through, that's the benefit of being a live viewer. And yeah, that's about it. Enjoy, bon appetit, bete bon, that's in Hebrew. And I'm gonna, like I said, give Cannacook the stage here. And let's get started. We're gonna start off with cannabis oil.
Let's do an oil extraction.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do it.
So I'm trying to get used to the cameras here, so we'll get this going.
If we're a little shaky.
All right. So did we want to talk about how to decarb first and show some decarb?
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's do that.
Okay, perfect. You want to hold that?
Yep.
And so what we've got here, all we really need to do for a decarb, luckily, is we're going to be using some purple ice, a mason jar, and then of course a mason jar lid, and you'll need your oven. But you're going to take your cannabis, and we've got some purple ice here. Can they see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And just kind of lightly grind it. Now, I'm not a big fan of just taking it and putting it in a grinder and grinding it up. I've heard through rumors that it will, kind of hurt the terpenes and the cannabinoids. I don't know necessarily if that's true or not, but that's just kind of been my philosophy on it.
Cody, is it true?
Yeah. Do you see my grin, Alana? Yeah, Chris, I do know. And so what's going to happen here is the smaller you grind up that cannabis, the more surface area for oxygen and the terpenes to leak out. So depending on what method you're using to decarb and what temperature you're using, you may or may not want to grind. But I do agree, something more like a hand broken up makes the nugs small, but doesn't fully break them down. So I think a large or loose grind is fine, but there's no need to grind fine as if you were putting it into a bowl or a bong or something.
And honestly, when you're cooking, it's a little bit better to have it a little bit bigger like this. That way, when you're straining your product, you're not going to have, cannabis falling through when you don't want it to be falling through.
Exactly. And I think just for a moment, we should talk about what decarb is. You know, we're diving right in. We've got purple ice, which is a type 1 high THC cannabis chemovar.
Yep.
And so it's going to be, they may or may not have a terpene profile on it, but they're going to decarboxylate this cannabis flower. And now decarb is the process of activating the cannabinoids that the plant makes. Mm-hmm. It actually produces THCA, which stands for acid. So in order to convert THCA, which is not necessarily psychoactive and doesn't get into the brain, it might have effects in the body, we're going to put it in the oven or put it into a slow cooker. There's many methods to do this. Bring it up to a desired temperature. And what's going to happen is it's going to break away the A from THCA or the acid. So we're decarboxylating the acid off of the THC flower and activating the herb to be more potent. And again, there might be some benefits to THCA, which is why it's important to not over decarb, lose some of your THC and lose any THCA benefits. So, but that's decarboxylation. And I know you guys know about it, but I'm a science nerd, so that carboxylic acid leaving.
It's important. You can't really cook with cannabis without decarbing, or you're not going to really get the effects that you're reaching to get.
Right, and I couldn't have nearly explained it as well as that. That was amazing. So
that's why we have Cody here.
Yeah, exactly
right.
But and one thing that we prefer and why we are putting it in the mason jar rather than putting it just on the baking sheet. Now you can do that, but I find with the mason jar it helps keep in those terpenes a little better.
It keeps the
moisture
really
in.
well.
You don't lose as much burning off.
You end up with better butter and better oil if your cannabis isn't extremely dried out. It will still work, but it's just not as good.
Yeah.
So guys, tell me about this, and I think this is what the viewers are definitely interested in. If you use the mason jar method, does your house smell less?
Yes.
Yes, it still does smell, but it smells a lot less than what it would be if you just put it on a baking sheet.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about doing the mason jar method is you also can use it in like a, what is that? Instapot. And if you have an Instapot at home, I've actually decarbed in an Instapot before. You can decarb it. I made it in a rice cooker as well as another way. But that way is going to be, you're going to want to have a laser thermometer because you're going to really have to monitor the temperature that way to make sure you don't burn it. Another tip is always try to go lower heat first rather than hot, because if you burn it, it's, game over.
Exactly.
So let's get this in the oven here.
We'll set our oven first to 200 and what is it?
We're going to be doing 230 on ours because our oven gets a little bit hotter than most ovens. Now, if your oven at home, if your oven is pretty normal and doesn't get nearly as hot as our gas one does, I would suggest doing 240. But like I said earlier, it's always great to have a laser thermometer on hand because it allows you to check the temperature while you are decarbing and making sure that you aren't burning it.
So you just add it into your mason jar. We're just going to lay it down on its side. You can lay it on a baking sheet if you'd like. You don't have to. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So we're just going to open our oven and then we just place it on the bottom rack, and that's it. That's all you got to do. And then
some people will set it on a baking sheet. I don't do that. But I've seen on some other videos that people will set it on a baking sheet, but I noticed if it's a mason jar, as long as you just put it on your side in there, it seems to do just fine.
What temp or how long?
40 minutes.
40 minutes.
Definitely,
so
you want to make sure that you're
minutes,
doing this in an oven-safe container, right? I know that sounds silly, but this is not a plastic sort of job. It's mason jar for a reason because it can tolerate these high temperatures.
Right.
And then as it regards to temperature, I think people are probably interested in what that is. So when we're decarboxylating THC flower, there's actually a lower, shorter decarb period. CBD is a more difficult molecule to decarboxylate, so you have to do it for longer at a higher temp. So you guys are talking about 240, 230 degrees Fahrenheit, which equates to about 110 to 115 degrees Celsius. And we're doing this for approximately 45 minutes. Now, I know some individuals are going to want to do it longer. They're afraid their oven wasn't long enough and they want to really decarb all the way. I would actually tell people to go a little bit slower. We know that once you pass that peak decarb period, you can actually lose THC and it evaporates off. And so it's important to just pick the recipe, choose, a tried and true temperature and stick to it strictly. Preheat your oven, stick it in for the allotted time and pull it out. Don't stress about whether it's fully decarbed and if it needs more time. You'll lose more terpenes, you'll lose more cannabinoids, and you won't gain anything. So pick a recipe, stick to a temp, stick to a time, and trust that that's going to get you where you need to go, especially for the newbies out there.
That's right.
Guys, a couple of questions before we move on. So first of all, Wesley's asking, he missed just the beginning of our presentation here. He's asking how much flour you put in the mason jar to begin with.
7 grams on that particular one. No, actually that one was 3.5 grams on that one. But in our recipe, we'll be using 7 grams on each recipe.
Yeah, and you can decarb 3 grams, 7 grams, 14 grams. There's no limit on how much you can decarb. I just wouldn't like shove as much cannabis in there as you can. You want it to be able to spread out a little bit. I typically don't go above 13 to 14 grams.
I was going to say about a ½ ounce per mason jar per 60.
Can you share the butter to herb ratio? I'm sure people are wondering what that ratio looks like. How much butter or oil are you using for every 7 grams of flour?
Well, so what we usually do is for every ½ pound of butter, we use 7 grams of cannabis. We like our stuff really potent.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
So
if you want less potent, you could do 7 grams for 4 sticks of for a whole pound of butter, which is 4 sticks of butter. And so it really just depends on how potent you want your butter. But 7 grams is a great starting point for butter and oil. Without going overboard.
Now, if you're somebody who's inexperienced to this, my biggest suggestion is start slow with dosing. You do not want to take a big monster dose and think it's the same as smoking, because it'll be a totally different experience.
Yes, it is.
So there's definitely math involved too. Alana, I don't know if when you were doing your market research here for this project, if you saw, there's a lot of calculators out there and they're not always easy to use.
No.
And they're not always accurate.
And frankly, the conversion that I learned was once you take so if you have 7 grams of cannabis at 20% THC, you take that and I totally lost where I was going. I hate numbers. But anyways, and then so when you times that, then at the end, what I learned is 0.878, I believe, is what you times it by. But I'm not that good with math.
So what, Chris?
Calculators out there.
Yes, there are, and there's many. There's one on cannacook.com, I think.
That's right.
So you guys have that as a resource. But really, what you're talking about, this is twofold for our listeners, and I do want to just kind of breeze through this. So when you're doing extraction, it's not perfect. So let's pretend 10% THC for easy math, and you use 10 grams of cannabis or three sticks of butter in your recipe, essentially. So if you did that, you would have 100 milligrams per gram of cannabis, right? So 10 grams of cannabis, you put in 1,000 milligrams. So that's THCA typically. So now you need to convert to THC, so multiply by 0.88 like you did. But here's the important part. You can try to get it exact as you want there, but butter extractions aren't perfect. So we need to stop worrying about how concentrated, how many milligrams this is exactly. And we need to be mindful on when we consume this cannabis product, how it makes us feel, and then we can increase the dose as necessary. Because extractions aren't perfect math, and these calculators can be often misleading and suggest a much bigger dose than is actually in your foodstuffs.
Absolutely.
Right. And so with that too, just make sure that if you're dosing, that you like you said, start slower and all that, because once you get to the max doses, you're gonna never want to do edibles again if you experience too much THC from eating it. So definitely
take it slow and low.
Slow and low. That's our.
So now we've got that decarb going. So we're going to jump in to show you guys how to do some coconut oil.
Absolutely.
It's a staple. It's one of the things. Butter and coconut oil are the two most important things that you want to know how to make. Make sure it's up there. Okay. So what I typically use is I get organic coconut oil like this. It's kind of mushy on the inside. You can use however much you'd like. I typically do a ½ cup for 7 to 8 grams. So what you're going to do is make sure that you have an oven safe dish. I usually just use these little glass dishes. We're just going to add our coconut oil in.
There we go. And one more thing I was going to throw out there too on the dosing, if you're cooking at home, a great thing to have is a journal to keep track of your cooking and your dosing. And that way, you know, you can try it one way, write down the effects and how it worked out for you. And then, you know, you can look back later as a reference, and that way you kind of get it down on what works the best for you, because everybody's going to be different. Some strains work better for some people than they do others.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a fun science behind all of it, but it's still so kind of vague in some areas.
Yeah.
It's an art. This isn't science. This is art.
It takes a while to get to the place where you feel comfortable doing it. But once you get there, it's easy. It's so easy. It really is. So we've got our coconut oil in here. And so I'm just going to add the cannabis in on top. Super easy. I'm just going to cover this with foil. And then we will stick this in our oven at 250 degrees. Your oven temperatures and times may vary, so just a heads up on that. But we're going to cook this for a total of 1 hour and 45 minutes. You just take it out after the hour and stir, put it back in, and that's it. You'll have really easy and great coconut oil. When you get it out of the oven, this stuff might still be kind of hot. This is what it's going to look like.
And so next, what we would need to do is strain it.
Yes, and I should have cut cheesecloth in advance. So what the items that you're really going to need to strain are cheesecloth, which is this, and then like a good mesh strainer like this. Combination of those two things will really help make sure that you don't get cannabis all up in your butter and oil, because you don't want to have cannabis flakes everywhere.
Yeah, we made the mistake the first time ever that we cooked with cannabis. We used coffee filters to try to strain it, and terrible mistake. Don't try it.
Don't do it. Bad idea.
Cheesecloth is not easy to find, but it is so handy in this case. It is absolutely worth the $5 on Amazon. You want cheesecloth.
Yes.
Absolutely. And if you're green conscious, they actually have reusable cheesecloth now that you can just wash it.
And we actually have some that we use.
Mm-hmm. Now, for some stuff, though, we've noticed like it damages it and you can't use it.
It sticks to it. So we've just got our cheesecloth up in our strainer, and you just pour the cannabis through. And
that's that coconut oil.
A little trick, every time you use cheesecloth, be sure to fold it over and squeeze out the leftover oil, because there's always going to be leftover oil. You can use like a potato masher, a spatula, or just your hands. And so this is what the coconut oil looks like before it gets hardened up.
So yeah, after you put that in the refrigerator, it will harden up.
And this is what the coconut oil will look like when it's hardened up.
There we go.
And now, how do you like to use that, Chelsea? Do you just kind of dollop it in, or do you saute your veggies? Like, what are you doing with that coconut oil?
Well, you know, mostly we honestly make gummies, but you can do so many things. You can add it to your coffee, your drinks, just like if you have a tincture. There's a ton of different recipes out there for coconut oil, especially if you're vegan. Coconut oil is a huge one for vegan cooking. It's in a lot of recipes for chocolates and such. So lots of good things you can use with coconut oil. It's definitely a staple. I've got to wash my hands.
She's got to wash her hands. And they've also now, Carrington Farms, they've got a new coconut oil out that is liquid all the time, which I found is really great.
No way.
Yes.
I heard of such a thing.
I'm trying to find the bottle of it, but I can't. But yeah, it's liquid all the time. And I've actually started using it for tinctures with my pets. And our dog is 14 years old and has skin cancer. And she is, the places she had it after taking the coconut oil infused with him, they started falling off. It was unbelievable.
It's actually like she's healing up and she's eating more. She's gained weight. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
People report some pretty promising benefits from cannabinoids, particularly CBD in animals. There's a lot of stuff out there. And whenever I talk about this, I think it's important to note that THC can be tough for dogs to process and can make them pretty intoxicated. So anyone who's thinking about dosing their dog, definitely watch for keeping that dose of THC very low. And in the safe range.
In here in where we are, hemp has to be below, I think, like 0.3%. And that way she is getting a, trace amount of THC, but nothing that's going to cause her to be, feeling that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. I love
it. So the coconut oil, like you guys saw, is honestly so very easy. There are machines that you can use to make coconut oil and butter. So we've got this Levo here. This is
this is a great time to introduce our sponsors, Levo.
Yes, fantastic machine. One of the best. It makes such amazing butter and oil. I love the touch screen on here. It really makes everything foolproof and easy. Levo is amazing. They do good.
Yes,
It seems like Levo has made it so that you basically, this is sort of a one-touch thing. You put your cannabis in there, you put your oil, and then you tell it to go. And in a couple hours, all the work that we're showing you here over this hour, this machine appears to do at the touch of a button.
Just it's great, and you just push a button and it dispenses everything for you. You don't have to use a strainer or cheesecloth, which I personally love because we go through cheesecloth in this house like insane. And the cleanup is really easy. So if you're going to get a machine that you want to use for cooking with cannabis, the Levo is where it's at. Really good. So we're going to move on to the butter next. Christopher is getting our butter chopped up.
So Chelsea, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second and just throw out a couple of questions here so that people can keep up. You answered, we've got people actually answering each other in the chat here. We had someone that asked how we decarb first, 40 minutes at 240 degrees. So we've actually, Linda answered the question for us. Thank you, Linda. The other question that I wanted to just jump in and see if we can answer, let me find it. Deb asked right back at the beginning whether the mason jar was sealed all the way.
Yes. Yep. Mason jar seal all the way. Double check it if you need to. Make sure that it's sealed. When you do take the mason jar out, it might be a little bit difficult to open at first. So just be cognizant of that. The top might want to pop off. I've had that happen before, and cannabis went all over the floor.
Also, if you're concerned about smell, open it outside.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good tip. Open it outside. That really, really helps.
Okay.
Yeah, and that smell, everybody who's listening, especially those who are cannabis smart, that's the terpenes. That is the smell of the terpenes evaporating off inside that jar. They're also the water in the terpenes is what's putting pressure inside there as they heat up. Some of the carboxylic acid, decarb, turns into CO2. It's carbon in the atmosphere now, and so it wants to force the pressure out of the jar. So let it cool. Maybe do it outside. Maybe treat it like a champagne glass. Just be careful.
Yes. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, and it will just kind of do a vacuum in there real quick.
All right. So.
All right. One quick question from Scott before we move on. What temperature was the coconut oil in the oven?
Oh, I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry. So the coconut oil in our oven, I do at 250 degrees. Our oven is pretty strong. So if you kind of have an oven that takes a little bit longer on your cooking times, maybe up it just a little bit, 5 degrees or so. So you're going to cook it at 250 for a total of an hour and a half and stirring after an hour.
Now, see, this is where I wanted to ask is, where are we going to lose a little bit of THC in that? Because we are going above 250 degrees. That's something I've always wanted to ask an expert.
It's a good question, Chris. I don't think there's a surefire way to answer it, but I can tell you for sure why it's longer and a little warmer than before, and that's because of the oil. The oil is playing a buffer in between the temperature of the stove and of the cannabis. So the oil's not necessarily heating up to 245 degrees as the air in the oven would. And so it's acting as a bit of a buffer, slowing down that process. I can't be sure that an hour and 30 minutes at 250 is perfect for every cannabis or every oven, but it sounds reasonable to go longer, a little warmer when that oil, that coconut oil is playing as a buffer.
Right, and then we use a water bath in there too, right?
Yeah, so, with our gas oven, I've noticed the cannabis really keeps moisture in a lot better. If you have an electric stove, you may want to stick another oven-safe dish in the oven with water, and that's just going to help keep the cannabis a little bit moist. I know when we lived in our old place, we had an electric stove, and it would really, really dry out that cannabis. So sticking a water bath in with it, it would kind of fix that problem.
There's so many different recipes and ways to do this, and that's what I really want to reinforce. I'm here to back the science, and the fact of the matter is, this is DIY at home science.
Absolutely.
These professionals who are doing extractions to make your gummies in California, for example, they're using advanced extraction equipment and getting much better yields than even you are at home.
Absolutely.
But what's great about it is doing it yourself and how much better it tastes when you're the one who ground it and decarbed it and turned it into that yummy treat. So,
and you don't have to be a professional or have all this fancy equipment or be a professional chef to be able to do this kind of stuff. So don't let that kind of stuff scare you. It's a lot easier than what you think it might be.
In fact, when we started CannaCook, we made it pretty clear, hey, we're starting off with you guys.
Yes.
We just became medical patients. This is our journey. And, that's how Can Cook was kind of, born out of that, is we wanted to grow along with the people here in Arkansas, where we are, because they were just starting to get cannabis because it finally was legalized here. And so, that's how Can Cook was born. We were like, it's not professional chefs only that can do this. Anybody can do it at home. I mean, I remember when I was in college thinking like, oh my gosh, that girl made brownies. How did she do that? And now I'm just like, it's so easy.
Yeah, it is. It's easy once you get into it. So you
All
guys
right, I think, Chris, why don't we go on to butter and then we'll
all right.
keep talking afterwards.
Chris got to wash his hands.
Sorry,
Wash your hands. This is good practice.
With the butter and oil, man, you get it all over your hands all the time.
All right.
Okay, so what you do is you just cut up your butter into cubes and just add it to a mason jar.
Now
You'll have to squish it down in there quite a bit, probably.
We use unsalted butter, right?
Yes, use unsalted butter. Unsalted butter has a higher cooking temperature before it burns. Salted butter will burn at a lower temperature. So if you're able, always try to use unsalted butter.
Yeah. Plus, you can always add salt after.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a question we get asked a lot, is like, why are you using unsalted butter? So
That's great.
So
then they're chopping the butter up to help it melt. That's all. It's the only reason they chop this butter up.
Yep.
Yes.
And then you just add the cannabis to the countertops.
Add it to the you try to get it in the jar, but like Chelsea said, you're gonna have to squeeze this all in here.
Yeah.
And
just to go over the quantities again here, how much butter have we got in the jar and how much flour did you put in there?
We've got a half pound of butter, which is 2 sticks. And then on the cannabis, we've got 7 grams of the purple ice here.
That's right.
And it is decarbed. Don't forget to decarb.
Or it's 3.5 grams.
Oh, that's 3.5
Yeah,
grams.
we were doing this one a
3.5
little bit lighter for the show because we know people are not going to probably want to make it as potent as we do, maybe.
Yeah.
So
now that you've got your butter in your mason jar, there's a lot of different ways to do butter, but we have personally found if you're not going to use a machine, the crock pot is probably the best way to do it. You can cook it slow and low, and you're not going to have to worry about stuff burning.
that's exactly right. You'll never get above 200 degrees when you're keeping it on low in a crock pot. So with having decarb cannabis in this already, you don't have to worry about it being activated. So now we put it in here, and it's a great temperature. We usually leave it in for at least 2 to 4 hours.
We've already got.
Yeah. What do you have that crock pot set to high or low, or what temperature do you have it set to?
We set it to low.
And
I love it. And just as a science reminder for the listeners, the temperature at which water boils is 100 degrees Celsius, or somewhere around 230, 240 degrees Fahrenheit, or 220, I guess. But either way, you're talking about keeping a stable temperature by adding this water bath. And now the cannabis will only go up to a certain temp, and you can't burn it. You can't lose that THC and those terpenes nearly as easy.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I've done the laser thermometer in our crock pot before just to see where the temperature is. And ours, when you keep it on low, is about 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit.
So
there you go. So a little less than boiling.
Yep. And you'll notice too that 180 degrees is one of the temperature settings you can use on the Levo. So that's obviously a pretty good area to infuse with, a good temperature.
For how long are you going to do this in the crock pot?
Minimum of 2 hours, but if you want it to be more potent, absorb better, I would do closer to 4 hours.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. Around 3 hours. 2 hours is probably a little short in that. But again, it's going to matter if you're using THC or CBD. You know, there's a lot of controversy and arguments about what the perfect temp and the perfect time is. And what I want everyone to take away today is that there is no perfect temp. There is no perfect time. Right. Everybody's oven's a little different. Everybody choose a recipe that's some other people like. Stick to that, see how it works, and then you can tinker around and figure it out. But there is no one perfect thing. But don't burn your cannabis. That's what I want.
Right.
Just don't overdo it, underdo it. You're much better off.
Exactly. So this is what the butter looks like when it comes out of the crock pot. And so we're just basically doing the exact same thing we did with the oil. You have your strainer and cheesecloth.
Excuse me. It's hard for me to
It's hot.
grip this. There we go. Okay.
So you just strain it through just like you do with the other one. And again, be sure to fold over your cheesecloth and get that strained out. Let me show you guys. That is what the butter looks like before it gets hardened up.
Okay.
And then after the butter gets hardened up, this is what it looks like. Looks like just regular butter. Sometimes, depending on what cannabis strain you use, it might have a little bit of a green tint to it, or it might just come out like this yellow color. So it doesn't matter what color it is, it's still going to taste good. Is it hot?
Yeah, I was looking for the potato masher real quick to squeeze that out. Okay.
Typically, the warmer we decarb and the longer we infuse the cannabis oil, the darker and greener it'll get. As the oil pulls more of the chlorophyll, the stuff that makes the plant green, it'll pull it into the butter, make it a little darker. And also what temp you decarb at as well.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, there's a ton of different ways to make butter. You can do it in the machines. You can do it stovetop. I've just found that it comes out better, and it's less time consuming, honestly, doing it in the crock pot if you don't have like a levo to use. Yeah. It's a good thing to use.
And just to
Chelsea,
reiterate,
the
the cannabis...
pot.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go on, Katie.
I just wanted to know if you were using decarboxylated flour in the crock pot in this oil infusion, or was that, like, did you already decarb that flour? I just wanted the watchers to know.
Always. Anytime you're going to make butter or oil or anything, be sure you decarb it first separately if you're wanting the psychedelic effects that THC gives you.
Yeah, especially that. Okay.
Psychedelic.
Hey, that's not far off. For a long time, cannabis was classified in that. Yeah.
Guys, a couple of equipment questions while we pause here. So first of all, Scott's asking, does coconut oil work in the crock pot as well?
Does a coconut work in the crock pot as well?
Yeah, you can definitely do coconut oil in the crock pot. I prefer to do it in the oven. I've just had a little bit better luck doing it in the oven, but you can absolutely do it in the crock pot. It's not going to affect anything differently with the coconut oil. So yeah, definitely.
All right. And what about olive oil? Would that work as well?
Oh yeah. You can use a bunch of different carrier oils with cannabis.
Everything from like almond oil to extra virgin olive oil.
MCT oil is another one that's I use a lot for tinctures. Is MCT. Flaxseed oil is another one that you can use. Anything that's going to have a high fat content for an oil is a good.
Right. So Cody, you want to talk about fat content for a bit?
I love it. All those oils work. We can use any oil, and you can maybe infuse it if you're really into culinary arts. You know, if you want some sort of walnut oil mixed with cannabis, do it. But generally, Chelsea talked about butter and coconut oil. So she probably had more success. She's read more articles referencing this. This probably has to do with the saturated fat content. Fats that are solid at room temperature, that sit in it as a glob on your counter instead of as a liquid, tend to have more saturated fat, which does a better job of pooling the THC and cannabinoids out of the cannabis, which is why we tend to use those room temp fats. And it tends to be a little better extraction.
Which brings me to another point, which I wanted to show this real quick. The black walnut, that's another good one. And you can make a lot of salad dressings with that one.
Yeah, you can make infused salad dressings with it. It's really awesome.
What was I going to say?
I don't know.
I don't either now.
I've got one then. While you remember what you were going to say, Chris, Wesley is asking if you can recommend a brand or a type of laser thermometer.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Let me grab mine real quick.
It's a great one.
It's actually,
you guys are so decked out there.
There's an article on CannaCook, in fact, that has this listed on there. But the brand that we use, it is a smart sensor.
We got it off of Amazon. Right? We got it off of Amazon.
It came off of Amazon. It also came with a regular thermometer that you can check meat and stuff with. And it was only like $25, I think. So.
But it's really helpful when you're cooking in the crock pot or even in the oven. You can open it up and just kind of make sure that stuff is getting to the temperatures that you want it to be at.
We can even show how this one works.
Yeah, show them.
So this one here, you would just take it and then you'd put it right on the...
Can you guys see?
Cannabis there.
Yeah, we can see great. So it says it's about 250.
Somewhere in there. You'll see it accidentally hits the bar in there. So I'm trying to get it right on the cannabis, but
wow, that is so cool.
223.
Technology, right?
240.
Yep.
Right, amazing. Gonna get me some of that.
Is what we were wanting to do.
Yeah. So a thermometer like that is really helpful. Triple check your temperatures if you want.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, the more serious you get, the more likely you are to need one.
Oil?
Do what?
Sorry, Cody, I cut you off again. What about MCT oil? Do you guys ever use
it's our favorite
MCT
for
oil?
Big one. Yeah, MCT oil for tincture is by far our favorite. Most of the dispensaries in Arkansas, when they first started out, I know we're using MCT oil. I think they've kind of branched off from.
I think so too. Now there's a few different carriers that they use, but yeah, MCT is one of my favorite. That one and the liquid coconut now that's out. I've been actually doing a lot of reading, and apparently there's like some different coconut institutes for cancer right now, which I didn't know until really recently. So apparently there's a lot of correlation between coconut and helping with cancer.
It's very interesting.
Something to look into. Where I live, my coconut oil is basically liquid like 9 months of the year. So I guess it probably makes a difference where you live as to whether that's going to be exciting.
That's true. That is true.
I get like 6 months of firm coconut oil. Yeah, let's do it.
That's all right. Half-half's all right.
So chocolates first.
Yes,
All right.
chocolates.
Let's move on to chocolate.
Our chocolates, we're going to be using Ghirardelli.
Yes. Yep. So any brand is fine on melting chocolates. I don't know if this is available all over, but this is Ghirardelli. It is the best tasting chocolate that goes with peanut butter. I don't normally like white chocolate, but this brand is so good and it always makes the perfect chocolate.
And it comes also with regular chocolate, this brand, and you basically, I mean, you do exactly the same thing that we're doing right now.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's dark chocolate, white chocolate, milk chocolate, it's all the same.
We're going to do it all the same for this. Yeah.
So for anyone who tuned in late, Alana, I just want to, so before we were making the oil, right, which is the preparation, extracting the THC from the flower. Right now, we're moving on to the canna cook. You know, we're cooking now. We're going to start to infuse those oils we made into these chocolates that you're going to boil down. And I think this is, for those people who like cooking, this is the part. The people who like cannabis, it was the last part. And the people who like cooking, you know, if you're just catching us, this is your turn.
What about the people who like both?
That's right.
Stay around later for our round table.
Right.
So what you need to do chocolates is you just need a double broiler, just like this. Right now, I do have the heat turned up all the way too high, just until I get the water boiling. Oh, the lighting is weird that way. So you can, what I typically do is I do 2 cups of chocolate for 1/2 cup of canna butter. I like my stuff really potent. And so you're going to end up with really potent chocolate if you do it that way. If you want to have something maybe less, maybe go with 1/3 of a cup or 1/4 of a cup of canna butter. Start out that way and just kind of see how it goes for 4 cups of chocolate. But again, it just kind of depends on how potent you want your chocolates to be. So we've got, molds. We're going to need those.
The molds real quick.
So what we're going to do is, I think my water, it's not bubbling quite yet, but that's okay. We're going to try. So what I do is I just add in first 2 cups of chocolate. So, and each bag of Ghirardelli is 2 cups.
Now, if they want this recipe, where can they go find it after our show here today?
Just head over to cannacook.com and you will be able to find the chocolate recipe, the gummy recipe, actually everything we're doing today, the oil, the butter, all of it.
Yeah, we're going to add all the links in the chat as we're going as well.
So I just let the chocolates get a little bit melted just like this before I add in the other 2 cups of chocolate. So now I'm going to add in the other 2 cups. And I forgot to mention on canna butter, everything, like I said earlier, is different colors. I've got a couple of different canna butters in here, so you can tell how some of them are more green than the others. But make sure you have room temperature canna butter, because otherwise it's going to take forever for it to melt in your chocolate. And you do not want the chocolate to be sitting in the heat for too long, or it's going to get chunky and thick and hard to get into your molds.
Yes.
So I'm just going to stand here and stir. If you guys have any questions or something while I...
Yeah, so something I thought could be great for us to talk about now, and this is, you know, you keep mentioning potency, and I think that many people have had experiences with edibles, maybe their first experience with edibles, maybe, you know, that chick who made the brownies back in college, as you mentioned before, Chris, and they had a bad experience and ended up tripping out for like 8 hours, and now they're concerned to try edibles again. Cody, what would your advice to these people be?
Well, I think the first thing is kind of know how you tolerate cannabis. You know, like this is not something that you should offer to your friends who are inexperienced and say, oh yeah, here's a homemade treat that I made. Oh, I think it's fine for me. Just take the whole thing. Because in reality, you know, cannabis tolerance grows rather quickly, but to the inexperienced, a high dose of oral cannabis can be really overwhelming. And we can get into the, yeah, you've been there is what you're telling me.
Yeah, my first experience with edibles was awful.
Yeah, so, and this is the whole thing, and this is why a lot of states, like legal states, have actually moved to standard dosage units. So each gummy must be no more than 5 or each no more than 10. Yes. Because a high dose of cannabis, while it can't harm you, right? It doesn't put you into the hospital, it doesn't stop your breathing. It can be very uncomfortable, and there's not really a good way to back out of there.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of...
I could see it absolutely causing somebody to have anxiety to the point of feeling like having a heart attack or something, you know?
I work in an emergency department, and I can tell you that that's not a terribly uncommon thing to see individuals who come in with too high a dose of cannabis to the ED. Even though there is very little we can do for you, you just need to become less high. It's not typically life-threatening, but it happens.
Okay. So I suppose that's a really important tip to keep in mind, is that if you do end up in an uncomfortable situation, is to remember this is going to pass.
That's right.
Exactly. Yes, that's such a good point.
You can see the chocolate here. There's just a little bit of lumps in here, not much. So that's where I want it. So now I'm going to add in my can of butter. Like I said, I'm using a full cup. This will give really potent gummies. So just be cognizant of that. So now I am just going to let this melt. I did turn my heat down to about a 5 or a 6, which is medium heat. You don't want your chocolates to be cooking over high heat, so just don't forget to turn that down. We're just going to stir until all of this can of butter is melted. That's why you want it at room temperature. Otherwise, you're going to be standing here for 5 minutes trying to get this butter to melt.
Yeah. And importantly for the viewers, Chelsea's using a double boiler, and it's important when you're messing with chocolates. Okay, if you do try to do this on your stovetop without this double boiler, you are going to have a burnt chocolate mess, and you're going to wonder why you put all your can of butter in there and wasted it. And so double boiler, or find a different way to melt your chocolate. Do not put it directly on the stove. And then if you do find yourself too intoxicated, there's no perfect way out. You know, definitely deep, you know, try to breathe, try to get into a situation you're comfortable in. Some people recommend sniffing black pepper. Maybe it's certainly not a problem. If you want to go sniff the black pepper, and if it helps, great. If it doesn't, you know, keep trying. But eating something, nibbling on something, getting into some fresh air, some deep breathing will all greatly reduce the need for you to feel that anxiety. But be mindful of your dose. You want to really start slow, especially cannabis naive. And you really want to know that you're only taking a small amount and waiting a few hours, at least 3 probably, before you take more cannabis. The most common way this happens is you have a chocolate, 45 minutes later, the chocolate was delicious, so you go take another one. But these effects are additive, and all of a sudden you've taken far too large a dose, and you're very uncomfortable for many hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to ask, too, I've heard that CBD can help with being too intoxicated. Is that true, Cody?
I love that question. You know, that's a complicated pharmacologic question if we get down to it, but here's what I'll say. Oral CBD is not absorbed very quickly, so oral CBD would not necessarily help. You can try sublingual, maybe put one of those CBD tinctures or something under your tongue and leave it there, maybe. There's also inhaled CBD flower, or what you guys call hemp, or what I like to call type 3. If you don't know what that is, go read more at the Kenigma. And so type 3 or hemp, low THC cannabis, if it's inhaled, that you're going to get higher levels of CBD, and that may have a little more ability to kind of take the edge off of THC. But in general, CBD doesn't necessarily work. Nothing necessarily works. You need some time, you need some fresh air, and you need to avoid anxiety-provoking activity.
Yeah, put on like a good movie, a good comedy or something. Or some good,
how about some music?
Music, I was going to say. Or call a friend.
All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't eat more of the chocolates.
I know you're hungry.
So our chocolate is nice and runny. This is how I want it. If it gets too thick, a little can of butter chunk in there. If it gets too thick, like I said earlier, it's really hard to pour into a mold. So this is a great consistency where it's really runny like that. That's where you want it to kind of be. There's a little chunk of can of butter floating around in there, but I'm still going to go on ahead and start pouring. So what
Yeah,
you're
for
gonna
TV
need-
magic, we gotta speed along, but you should make
That's
do a
right.
good job of incorporating all of this at home. You want it to be as even and consistent as possible.
Absolutely. So you'll need candy molds. These are just silicone candy molds. You can get them at any stores, Amazon, anything like that. So all I do is I will just kind of pour, and then I will, yeah. And then I just spread the chocolate out. And we just do this until all of our chocolate molds are full. It's a little bit messy doing it this way. You can try to pour it nicely into each and every one, but I just found that it really is a lot easier just to do it this way. It takes a lot less time. And you want to kind of move quickly with chocolate just because you don't want it to get thick, really thick and chunky, because then otherwise you're going to notice a difference in the taste. It's going to taste a little bit weird, and it's just harder to work with. Can you guys see this okay?
Yeah, we can see.
We see your little weed leaf chocolates.
Yeah,
There we
those
go.
cute.
Those are so cute.
That one too.
And what have we got over here?
cacti.
Pineapples and cactus. Got it.
And it looks like
Right.
flamingos too.
We've got
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
many different kinds of molds. It's unreal.
It is. It's fun. Anytime we go on a little trip or something and we go into a gift shop, she has to find some
Yeah,
new molds.
I have to get
Ah.
all kinds of different ones.
Yeah. And now usually we would not let the butter, have little chunks in
Yeah.
here, but we're trying to keep it on.
Trying to keep it going a little quick. So I'm going to let Christopher keep doing that.
Okay.
Well, I
Cody, I've got a question for you in the meantime. You mentioned black pepper to help with uncomfortable effects of edibles. And Nicole has asked, is chewing peppercorn or taking sniffs of black pepper not work to decrease the high?
So there's certainly no scientific evidence to say that sniffing black pepper will do that. And that's, again, I'm a practicing pharmacist. I really lean on science to support this. But let me tell you the theory, the background. So black pepper is high in something called beta-caryophyllene and other terpenes. But it's high in this terpene called beta-caryophyllene. And the idea is that beta-caryophyllene, even in low doses, can compete at something called the CB2 receptor in the endocannabinoid system. So there's a mechanistic rationale, and there's anecdotal experience with people trying this and feeling that way. But there is no existing science to suggest that would be effective. There is a drug, believe it or not, that was made and approved in Europe in the 2000s that does block the CB1 receptor and has been shown to stop the effects of THC. It's called Rimonabant. You can't buy it anywhere.
Oh, wow.
It's no longer available. But
I was
you
actually
could.
gonna
It
ask you
exists.
that. It's not something I
No. It's a approved medication in Europe for obesity in the 2000s, and it's no longer available. It was a cannabinoid blocker.
Was it a stimulant?
No, it was to block the kind. You know how when you smoke THC, you get hungry? The idea is if you block that response, the endogenous response, you'll be less hungry, you'll eat less, and it was shown to work.
Wow.
But it also made people really sad.
It made people sad?
Yeah, they removed it from the market because of inducing anxiety and depression and potentially even suicidality.
Oh.
We're getting a little deep here on the pharmaceutic side. I didn't mean to go there, but the pharma knows
where did
about
we
the
end up?
endocannabinoid system.
How did we get here?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take us back to butter, guys. With a few
Yeah.
questions here. Marcelo has asked whether the potency of the canna butter depends on more on the amount of weed that you put in, or the potency of the flower itself.
Is that for you?
Go, Cody.
Chelsea, give me your response, and then I'm happy to chime in.
I think it's actually both. If you're going to be cooking with something that is like a 20% THC, both ways are going to affect the potency. So you do want to check the amount on the THC and then how much you're going to be using, because you don't want to accidentally use 3 grams of something, but it be extremely, extremely high THC, and you're going to end up with too potent of butter. So both really matter.
That's exactly right. It depends on what kind of flour you're using, whether it's whether it's something that you decarbed all the way, or if it's something. Most importantly, is what percent THC and how much did you use to how much butter you have. That's the 2 drivers of potency: how much cannabinoid is in there and how much butter you use. And then potency just means the concentration of those cannabinoids in the oil or in the tree.
This is the chocolate. It's kind of a mess.
Yeah.
We're going pretty quick. We normally don't just slap it on like that. But so what we typically do is we just add these into the refrigerator. I don't even know if we have room in our refrigerator. It's cold enough outside. We could just set it all outside. But yeah, so we typically just stick them in the refrigerator. It'll get hardened up, and then you can very easily pop it out. After some of the chocolates get hardened up, we will show you guys how easy it is to get it popped out. Chris is actually taking some of them outside because we don't have room in our fridge. I guess I should have checked that first.
Resourcefulness, I like it.
That's right.
It would not work in Israel.
No.
It's pretty cold. No, it's like 7-8 degrees Celsius here at the moment. It's pretty cold for Israel.
God.
That might work. That might work.
Yeah, Cody, I've got a question for you from Alex, asking if you found good research data on the conversion of THCA to THC. Basically, he's saying that he's seen conflicting information about temperatures. You
Yeah,
weigh in there?
100% agree with Alex. I think you said his name was.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I want to say conflicting information, but what the research has shown is there are variables in play. So depending on how much cannabis you put in that jar when you decarb it, it can take longer or shorter to get to the full decarb. So how deep your pocket is, right? And then whether or not you've got humidity in that jar can influence how perfect the decarb is. That's why I really want home cooks to not stress over the perfection of their decarb. You know, we know that THC does things in the body. It doesn't cause the intoxicating effects, but you're going to be able to get plenty of THC into these homemade edibles. The most important thing is that you just figure out what the right dose of the edible that you made is, right? And it's going to be dictated by how well you did your extraction, what temperature, what oil, how well you mixed your cannabis oil into your chocolates. That one with that cannabis butter chunk is going to be hella potent compared to the other ones, right? So all these factors interplay into the perfect dose. Much better would be just to kind of learn what produces the best butter. What do you like the most as you sort of develop it? But to start off, choose a recipe, stick to it, and then figure out the right dose of that edible. Then you can go tinking with your recipe.
And Cody, I have a question for you too, real quick. Everybody in our state seems to be on a lecithin kick. It's like everybody asks us, why don't you use lecithin in your gummies and stuff? And it's like, you know, when oils and fat and butters have, 12, 14 grams of fat per serving, I don't ever see any need for soy lecithin when it's like that. Mm-hmm. So my question is, what is your opinion of the soy lecithin?
Good question.
So lecithin is sort of part of the kind of chocolate making anyway. So to make chocolate, to get the oils that make up the chocolate to stick with the cacao, they use what's called an emulsifier. An emulsifier blends a liquid and a fat. And so using soy lecithin with butters and infusions, gummies, for example, all it's going to do is try to integrate the two layers of fat and of oil and keep it in one emulsion, which is oil inside of water. And so the soy lecithin could help create that product consistency. It could also produce better shelf life. It'll maybe stay together better at room temp, or when it goes into fridge, it firms up a little differently. So soy lecithin has a lot of benefits, but as far as truly absorption, there's nothing to suggest that it creates a more potent, but it might create a little bit higher quality and bridge the oils and the waters in whatever you're making a little bit better.
Okay.
So
awesome.
Do we have time for gummies, or do you want to jump to questions?
I think we can fit it in. I think we've been, jumping through our questions pretty simultaneously here. So I think we can fit it in if you guys have time. I'll point out, I just popped something up on the screen here. Scott has said that he would like for you to send the butter chunk chocolate over to him right away.
I'll get that thing over to you.
All right, Scott. Yeah.
All right, as long as you know which one it is.
Potency test. He's going to do a potency test.
We'll see.
Send it to Cody first, and then we'll send it over to Scott. All right, so we're moving on to gummies?
Yeah, so for gummies, this is something, if you're a vegan, this will not be a recipe for you. There are vegan options. We're using gelatin in this. That's not vegan. In place of gelatin, you can use something that's called agar powder. It's just a vegetarian option. It's a 1-to-1 ratio of this. And for flavoring, we use Jell-O. For vegan options, you can use fruit juice. Coconut oil and everything else will stay the same. But this is our little recipe. You can pick any kind of flavors that you want. We have tried
Oh my gosh, yeah, so many different flavors.
This is one of our favorites. We do raspberry orange.
Yep.
So good. Definitely recommend. And then this Knox Gelatin brand is by far my favorite. I know there's a couple of other brands out there, but this one really, really does a great job. So over to the stove. I've got our pot over here already on medium heat. And I've got a half a cup of water in here. So what I always do first is I get the flavored Jello added in first.
Now, on this one, it's not a double broiler, right?
No, not a double broiler, just regular pan. Half a cup of water already in. I always add my flavored Jello first because once you add the gelatin, the consistency is going to get really thick really fast. So I would definitely recommend adding that second. So we're just going to get this a little mixed up, make a mess while I do it.
That's Chelsea.
It's not cooking otherwise.
I'm a very messy cook, I have to admit.
Yeah,
my fiance loves it.
I bet.
I was just about to say my husband would say exactly the same thing about me.
I'm just adding the second flavoring in. If you hear jingling, it's our cat, Henry, walking around. Sorry if he interrupts anything.
He has a tendency of showing up when it's the wrong time.
Yes. So we've got the flavored added in. In this Knox pack, there are 4 separate packages in here. We are going to be using all 4. And I'm on medium heat. I think I said that. So I typically just add these one at a time. When you add these, be sure to stir as you're adding them in. And like I said earlier, you're going to start to notice the consistency will start to get quite a bit thicker. Be sure to keep it over medium. You don't want it to be very, very hot because it'll start bubbling and it'll get a lot thicker, a lot faster. And we need a little extra time to work with all this. So always turn.
Chelsea, Courtney's just asking what flavoring you're using there. Can you just repeat the ingredients you've got in?
Yep. So this is raspberry orange. And then the Knox gelatin is unflavored, but you can use pretty much any type that you would like. We have tried so many different types of flavoring.
It's 2 3-ounce boxes, right?
Yep. A total of 6 ounces of flavor. You can use 1 flavor if you want, or 2.
Yeah.
All right. And how much liquid did you put in there?
A half a cup of water.
And so that's the Jello recipe, right? You're just following the Jello recipe, but throwing 4 of these gelatin packets in there.
Oh, I don't know. Is it the Jello recipe? I'm going to have to look. I guess it probably is.
Sounds like Jello.
For sure, it's probably.
It probably
pretty
is
close.
pretty close. Oh, I hate this mixer. I don't know why I got this one.
Use that. There you go. There's that one.
There we go.
The sides right there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a pretty red.
I know. Isn't that pretty? I always love to see what color is going to end up after we mix all these different flavors together. Sometimes we made one the other day and it was like a dark purple.
Yeah, we did. It was, I don't remember the flavors now. It was blueberry and lemon, I think. Blueberry and lemon.
Is that what it was?
I think it was.
Blueberry lemon. And when you're whisking, be sure to whisk pretty briskly. It's kind of hard sometimes to get this Knox gelatin really mixed in well. So be sure that you're getting it mixed in as much as you possibly can. Yeah.
Alana, I see somebody ask, Golden Child in the chat just asked if we can use shatter, and I think it's a good time to bring up concentrates. So
let's talk about concentrates.
What you guys saw here today was a at-home flour extraction to make home butters and oils.
Yep.
Okay. So that's the process of decarboxylating the cannabis and then infusing it into the butter, and now you're incorporating it into your foodstuffs. Now, skipping one step, a lot of cannabis concentrates can be bought at the store. And many of those cannabis concentrates are already, not all of them, but many are already decarboxylated. Incorporating those decarboxylated products, for example, a shatter, probably like a butane extraction or CO2 extraction, even oils that are in the form of tinctures. all those products can essentially be added late in the process of cooking the food, as to not heat them too much because they're already activated. So they just need to be properly incorporated into the food, sort of at the last step. So if you're making a pasta sauce or whatnot that you want to put oil in, just go ahead and add that concentrate plus whatever other oil you might be using towards the end of cooking. And it functions essentially the same as using these oils that we use here today.
And I have made gummies. I make them probably twice a week, and I've been doing this for a year. And I was trying to rush you guys, and I forgot to add in the cannabis oil.
Ha!
So I was like, oh my God, I have never messed up gummies. And of course, I'm going to do something silly when I'm on live. So, all
right. So when should you have added the oil
so
in there?
You'll add your half a cup of water in, and then you add your coconut oil in. I typically do about 2/3 cup of coconut oil. Again, the more you add, the more potent it's going to be. We like our stuff really potent, so you can start smaller if you need, but you'll add your coconut oil and your water, and you just mix. Your coconut oil is going to melt, and then you add your flavored jello in, and then your gelatin. I was like, why is this consistency looking weird? I couldn't figure it out. And then I turn, I'm like, oh, it's because my coconut oil is still sitting right here. So we can whip up another batch and show you guys how to do it properly.
Oops.
If we have time. I know I told him, I was like, I've done this.
How many times? It's because we got to talking. That's what it is.
So if you want, I can start over and show the actual steps. It's up to you guys if we have time or not.
Oh, you know what? I think you're just gonna make some placebo gummies. Just show us what those bad boys look like.
Yeah, show us the ones you did earlier. I'm gonna add the recipe over here in the stream so everyone can follow along. Chelsea, actually, just a question. If you were to go back to that stage where you should have added the oil, Ken's also asked me if you can use juice instead of the half cup of water. Would that work as well?
Yeah, you could definitely do that. I personally haven't done it, but I have seen different recipes out there where people add juice in instead of water. I would just make sure that your juice isn't going to overpower the flavor of your Jello. If you're going to be using Jello, you might end up with some kind of funky flavoring in there. But juice is definitely good. And especially for the vegan gummies, juice is where it's at.
Yeah. And
all right.
Come out, this
is what the gummies actually look like.
Oh, very nice. What would happen if you added the oil now?
Do what?
What would happen if you added the oil now? Is it too late?
But we don't want to waste the. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's just, that's so funny. Gummies are the ones.
You don't need to do experiments for my entertainment.
So I could speculate as a pharmacist. So gelatin is going to serve as that viscosifier and a little bit of that emulsifier. So it's going to incorporate the waters and the oils evenly. It's possible that with appropriate stirring and some more heat, it would go in. But it's also possible that this oil might not incorporate into the water quite as well because
that's
you
what
add.
I was worried about.
You end up with gross gummies.
Cannot believe
just two layers. You got a cannabinoid layer and a sugar layer.
That's probably
could be worse.
Like.
As far as layers go, it could be far worse.
Oh, that's so great. That's so funny.
All right, guys. So we're going to start wrapping up now. If anyone has any questions, anyone who's watching live and they want to shoot the questions now at the time, pop them in the chat. And so Cody and Chris and Chelsea can answer your questions for you. So we'll
hit me with the hard
give people a couple of minutes. Yeah, all of your hardest questions, shoot them in now. And for anyone who's watching the replay, if you have any questions that came up during the video, feel free to send us an email. You can get us on the Canigma. You can get us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. You can also find the guys from Cannacook over on their website. You can find Cody on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to connect with you, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
For now, I'm working on expanding that, but for now, LinkedIn is.
You can also shoot us an email over at Canigma, and we'll make sure that it gets to Cody. All right, we've got a few questions.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Chelsea.
I was just going to say for the gummy recipe, the correct gummy recipe and the chocolates, just go over to cannacook.com. Just put in cannabis. You can search cannabis gummies or cannabis chocolates, and you'll be able to find the written recipes with a video there.
Yep.
All right, awesome. So a couple of questions before we wrap up here. Tina's asking if you can just quickly explain the decarb process again. Cody, you want to take this one?
100%. So simply put, we often say that the cannabis plant makes THC, but that's not true. The cannabis plant makes cannabinoid acids, and they make it in the little trichomes on the plant. If you have questions about this, there's great articles on canigma.com that can help elaborate the parts of the plant. So when you take the flower, you're taking THCA or THC acid. Now, decarbing is short for decarboxylating. So this is getting into science, but know that the THCA is that carb part, okay? So you're trying to separate the acid part from the active part, which is THC. So to do that, you heat it up to a specific temperature for a specific time, in one of the many ways that Chelsea showed us here today. And when you heat it up to this temperature, that acid form goes away, and you actually go ahead and you get active THC, and that is what produces the most tangible effects of cannabis, and often why we're sort of fixated on making sure that we decarb perfectly. But there's a lot of factors at play here, many more than we could even talk about here today. So don't stress too much about the perfect decarb. Decarb at 240, 230 for 45 minutes, and you'll still get optimal levels of decarboxylated cannabinoids. Keep in mind, CBD or different types of flower will have different temperatures and decarb times. So be mindful of that if you're using CBD flower.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Cody. So a question about quantities. Wesley's pointing out that not everyone has access to the amounts of flour that we've seen in the demonstration today. How do we deal with, let's say, I don't know, you've only got a gram and you want to try making something. How do you kind of adapt the recipes to smaller amounts of flour?
Oh,
that's a tough one. Honestly, if you only have like a gram, I don't think you're going to be able to get a butter that is worth it. It's not going to. I don't think you'd be able to tell that you even put cannabis in it if you only had a gram.
I mean, you'd have to do like one stick or a half a stick of butter,
Yeah.
and then really cut down on the recipe. Like cut it down. You've got a red thing right there.
Do 1 stick of butter.
Yeah.
Instead
and then
of,
maybe try doing some chocolate or something with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fine recommendation. If you guys have been recommending for every 3.5 grams, or what's known as an eighth in the States, right?
Yep.
For every eighth, you said approximately 1 stick of butter, which
Yep.
is approximately a half a cup or 250 cc's. So if you had only a gram, divide by 3 or so. And again, this isn't a perfect science. You don't need to worry about the perfect ratio, but go through the same process. Take your gram, decarboxylate it, as Michelle or Tina asked. Yes, you can grind that flour up or break it up by hand, put it in the oven at 240 for 45 minutes. You decarb it, you bring it out, then you infuse it into the butter. You just don't need as much butter. It's really that simple. And you know, you can use 1 gram in a whole stick if, say, you're sensitive or you're new, or maybe you just love butter and you're going to eat a lot of it. And like whatever it might be, you can work with this yourself, and don't feel limited by whether you can afford 7 grams or just 1 gram. You can experiment and see what you like. But you can also decarboxylate and, you know, make into like a milk tea. There's so many ways to use this flour, and cannacook.com is one of the great resources you can check out to find more recipes and more ideas. Don't feel afraid to play around. That's the whole point here. That's why we're talking about it.
And I was thinking too, with 1 gram, something that you could probably do pretty well would be a low, like an MCT, just a very small amount, enough to like fill a tincture. You could probably make a pretty good, you know, small amount of that with a gram. Another thing too is like save up your keef, save up your reclaim. You know, if you're on a budget and you're trying to go for the most bang, you might be, you know, looking into concentrates or distillates even.
That's something I was going to show. This is, what do they call it?
Distillate.
Here?
It's just
a
dabbable syringe, and it's basically already decarbed, so you don't even have to decarb that. You just kind of warm it under warm water, and you're going to just stir it right into your butter. It's actually one of the easiest things to do is working with concentrates.
And what's so funny is we were both thinking that concentrates were going to be really difficult, and so we kind of shied away from it, and we've gotten into it the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And it's even easier than flour.
Yeah, it is.
All right, one more question. I'll pop it up on the screen here. This is a question from Michelle. What would you recommend to make first? I've never cooked with cannabis, but I would love to try.
Ooh, well, it kind of just depends on if you're wanting to go more the baking route. It would be butter. You could do anything from brownies to cookies to chocolates. If you're wanting something that's more vegan friendly, you could do the coconut oil, do gummies, or vegan chocolates, vegan gummies. It really just kind of depends on what your personal preference is and what you would like to start with. But coconut oil or butter would be my recommendation on where to start.
And mine would be probably a tincture. Those are so easy with a crock pot. It's absolutely one of those things that I started and I was like, wow, this is so easy. Just making your own tincture at home.
He's always making tincture for us.
Buy different little flavorings at the store and make, flavored tinctures and stuff. So, if you're looking for simplistic, that's what I would go with. I'd go with a tincture.
All right, another recipe recommendation question from Christina. Christina was saying that she'd love to see some savory recipes, even though obviously often edibles are associated with sweet foods like candy, cakes, cookies. What savory recipes do you guys like?
Oh,
pork chops.
Oh, pork chops, a green bean, like a can of gravy, and
twice baked potatoes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we've got quite a few different recipes over on Can of Cook. Twice baked potatoes is probably one of my favorites.
Yep.
And then gravy. The way you do gravy is you actually can make can of milk.
Yep.
We don't drink milk. We use almond milk. And it seems to do just fine.
Yep.
We don't have to add anything in to bind it, any soy lecithin or anything like that.
It's got a little bit of fat in there, and I think it does just fine. Plus, when I do milk, I'm not looking for like real potent. Just the person who just asked, I also, am also trying to get medicinal benefits from this stuff. So for me, it does matter too, from that.
Also, pizza is one that we really, really love to make cannabis infused.
Yeah,
that's great. Cheese dip. Or salad dressings even. You can get like these different kind of oils like Christopher showed earlier.
Yep.
Something kind of like this. You can make your own salad dressings.
And do that. And see, you could do this real easy with like a tincture method. And then you've got something to make salad dressing or vinaigrettes with.
That's something that a lot of people kind of forget, that cannabis, you don't have to just make cookies, brownies, or cakes. There's so many different savory options out there that I'm a big fan of.
I mean, we'll even just take a little bit of butter here and there and just put it on our potato.
Yeah.
Or, something like that, because we're like,
it
we are trying to get, and
that's the whole thing here is you learn how to make this butter. If you paid attention during the first 30 minutes of this talk, you can make any recipe that uses oil, and newsflash, that's every recipe. And so there, you can use this for sauteing as long as you kind of keep the heat low and don't overdo it, or you can add a dollop of butter on top of whatever you're eating. And you can really utilize, CBD or THC in this way pretty effectively and pretty affordably. Even though the extraction at home isn't perfect, cannabis flower is far more affordable than many of those concentrates or other things. So it's just really you're versatile.
Well, and one thing I was going to say is this spring, I'm going to be doing like a grilling with Can of Cook special for a couple of months and just do some different grilling with cannabis and stuff in that.
Good
so
savory
some savory meals and stuff
like
because I agree. I think it should go beyond just, cookies or gummies or stuff. It's something you could implement into every meal for health.
That's right. And if you're, not wanting to
making me hungry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm starving. We got to wrap this up soon.
Oh yeah, you can do CBD. I mean, it's very, similar, but the decarb is going to be different with CBD, like we talked about. CBG, CBN, but the CBG and the CBN, there's not a whole lot of scientific data out there yet. It's just still kind of coming out, but I'm hearing good things about CBN with sleep and CBG for nausea, but there's not a whole lot of, maybe Cody has more on those.
No, you hit the nail, and if you go to the Canigma, you'll find articles kind of discussing what we know, which is limited. It's mostly animals or preclinical studies. We really don't know, but what we do know is the cannabis plants produces an absolute variety of these cannabinoids, over 90 of them, and they can present in different ways depending on how long we decarboxylate. One of the side effects of decarbing for too long, especially at a not too high of a temperature, is actually that you can form CBN. During your decarb process. So it's very possible and actually likely that some of your cannabis, even during a good decarb, does turn into CBN.
Oh, okay.
THC anyway. THC turns into CBN, not CBN.
Very interesting.
Very
cool.
All right.
I know.
All right, so I think that's a good time for us to wrap up.
And answer all the questions while we're doing it. We'll feed you. That'll be your payment.
That's right.
I look forward to that barbecue, so don't even sweat it.
Yeah.
All right, guys, so let's wrap this up. Anyone who wants more information about like Cody said, the science, head over to the Canigma and have a search around there. Anyone who's looking for any of the recipes that we talked about today or any more recipes, check out cannacook.com. I think we're probably going to have to do another one of these soon, guys.
I hope
We got a lot to cover here.
Now that we've
So send us some recommendations of the recipes that you'd like to see on the next one.
Messing up on the gummies. I can't believe I did that, but that's okay.
Hey, you know,
It's fine.
It happens.
But hey, you know, it's actually we've done that once before, and I actually appreciate, like, you know, hey, we screw up sometimes.
You know,
That's
it
just
happens.
happens with us
We're all
too.
I've
human.
burnt butter plenty of times. I've messed up plenty of times, and that's just another example. It's not always going to be perfect, but don't let that hold you back.
Yeah, and that's why we're here
Exactly.
trying for you to
Yes.
experiment for people so they
That's
don't have
right.
to burn their medicine.
I want to thank everybody who tuned in live.
Yes.
This has been really fun, and I look forward to the next one. I hope you guys join us, and maybe we'll do something healthy, Christina.
Yeah.
Good idea. All right, Chris, Chelsea, Cody, thanks so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great
Thank
night
you.
or
Thanks,
day,
everyone.
everyone.
Guys.
Thanks for
Appreciate it.
joining us. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.